What does courage look like when the sky rains fire and the soil trembles beneath boots and tanks? The Eastern Front was not just a battlefield, it was a furnace that reshaped nations and souls. From forgotten Soviet masterpieces to banned anti-war revelations, these films show the chaos, the loyalty, and the madness of men trapped in history's bloodiest war. These 12 restored epics are free to stream and ready to haunt you forever. Number 12. Come and See, 1985. Few films capture the terror of war with such unbearable realism as Come and See. When it premiered, audiences staggered out of theaters in silence, unable to process what they had seen. This Soviet masterpiece, directed by Elem Klimov, follows a Belarusian boy who joins the resistance only to discover hell on earth. Its title was taken from the Book of Revelation, and its imagery feels truly biblical. Shot with live ammunition and using actual wartime ruins, the production was an ordeal for everyone involved. Actor Alexei Kravchenko aged visibly during filming, and Klimov refused to use artificial effects for emotional authenticity. Soviet censors initially resisted approving the screenplay, fearing it was too traumatic and politically subversive. But after years of delay, it was finally released and instantly hailed as a cinematic warning carved in fire and ash. For decades, it was nearly impossible to find a clean print outside the USSR. Now beautifully restored, it stands as one of the most important anti-war films ever made. Every scream, every echo of gunfire feels like a ghost still trapped in celluloid. A film that does not show you war, it drags you through it. Number 11. The Ascent, 1977. Larissa Shepitko's. The Ascent is both a spiritual allegory and a tragic wartime fable. Set in Nazi-occupied Belarus, it tells the story of two Soviet soldiers captured by Germans. One chooses survival through betrayal, the other chooses martyrdom. It was inspired by the moral questions ordinary people faced under occupation. The result is a film of haunting religious intensity. Shepitko insisted on filming in freezing real conditions in the deep snow of the Soviet winter. Her cast nearly collapsed from exposure, but the stark realism was essential to her vision. When it was first screened, Soviet authorities feared its spiritual tone would anger officials who saw the story as too Christian and too bleak. For a time, it was quietly suppressed before word of mouth resurrected it abroad. The Ascent won the Golden Bear at the Berlin Film Festival and became Shepitko's international triumph. Tragically, she died in a car crash only 2 years later, leaving her husband Elem Klimov to finish her unrealized projects. Today, its restored version glows like an icon, a meditation on guilt redemption and the cost of faith in wartime. Few films feel this sacred few end with such silence. Number 10. Ballad of a Soldier, 1959. Ballad of a Soldier was a miracle of Soviet humanism at the height of Cold War tension, directed by Grigory Chukrai. It told the story of a young soldier granted leave after destroying enemy tanks. His journey home becomes a gentle odyssey through ruined villages, railways, and lives torn apart. Unlike propaganda of its time, it focused not on glory, but on fleeting love and kindness amid destruction. Chukrai had to battle censors who accused him of weakening patriotic fervor. He refused to rewrite the tender scenes of vulnerability, insisting that humanity was not a weakness. After heated debate, Moscow allowed its release, and to everyone's shock, it became an international sensation, winning awards at Cannes and BAFTA. Behind the scenes, the film's simplicity was its strength. Shot on limited resources with non-professional actors, it radiated sincerity. For Western audiences, it was the first time they saw Soviet soldiers as people rather than propaganda figures. The film's final scenes, a mother waiting forever at the end of a dusty road, still bring tears to modern viewers. Restored and available today, Ballad of a Soldier remains a hymn to the anonymous heroes of the Eastern Front. It whispers that not every victory is won with a gun, some are won with grace and memory. Number 9. The Cranes Are Flying, 1957. When The Cranes Are Flying premiered, it stunned the world. Soviet cinema had long been accused of cold heroism, but this film felt heartbreakingly human. Directed by Mikhail Kalatozov, it tells the story of Veronica and Boris, two young lovers separated by the Second World War. What begins as a romantic promise turns into a portrait of loneliness, guilt, and survival as Veronica endures the moral wreckage left behind by conflict. The camera glides through chaos with dizzying energy, capturing the emotional ruin of an entire generation. The film was revolutionary for its time. Kalatozov's use of handheld cameras and tracking shots was unheard of in Soviet realism, creating a sense of raw intimacy. Cinematographer Sergei Urusevsky's sweeping visuals made every frame feel alive, as if the lens itself were weeping. Soviet authorities were uneasy. They feared its depiction of grief and moral weakness would reflect badly on wartime heroism. Yet audiences adored it, and even the government could not deny its brilliance. When it won the Palme d'Or at Cannes, it shattered Western stereotypes about Soviet cinema. Behind the Iron Curtain, viewers quietly passed bootleg copies among themselves for decades. Today, its 4K restoration brings back the emotional thunder that defined it. The Cranes Are Flying remains not just a war film, but a love letter to those who carried invisible scars. It reminds us that every victory has a cost measured not in medals, but in broken hearts. Number 8. Fate of a Man, 1959. Sergei Bondarchuk's Fate of a Man is one of the great personal tragedies of war cinema. Released in the late 50s, it emerged at a time when the Soviet Union preferred collective heroism over personal despair. Yet Bondarchuk, who directed and starred in the film, defied expectations. He portrayed a truck driver captured by the Nazis, forced into slave labor, and broken by the loss of his entire family. His performance carries a quiet dignity that still pierces decades later. Filmed in stark black and white tones, it strips away the spectacle and leaves only the man and his pain. Soviet censors initially hesitated, claiming the story was too grim and individualistic. But when Nikita Khrushchev personally viewed the film, he reportedly wiped away tears and ordered its wide release. That political blessing saved it from obscurity. Fate of a Man became a massive success across Eastern Europe, yet it was largely hidden from Western audiences for years. The production itself was grueling. Bondarchuk shot scenes in freezing temperatures and refused to use stunt doubles. His goal was realism at all costs. In the film's final act, when the broken soldier adopts a war orphan, it becomes a symbol of hope, rising from ashes. Restored today, Fate of a Man feels timeless. It is about resilience in its purest form, the will to live even when everything has been taken. It reminds us that the Eastern Front was not just about battles, but about the survival of the human soul. Number 7. Ivan's Childhood, 1962. Andrei Tarkovsky's debut feature. Ivan's Childhood changed war cinema forever. Before this film, the Soviet industry viewed the war as a setting for sacrifice and victory. Tarkovsky saw it as a nightmare of lost innocence. The story follows Ivan, a 12-year-old scout working for the Red Army, whose courage masks a heart consumed by grief. Through dream sequences and haunting imagery, Tarkovsky redefined what a war story could feel like. The production was anything but simple. Tarkovsky inherited the project from another director who had been fired for lack of vision. He transformed the script into something lyrical and deeply personal. Censors feared the film's surreal tone and demanded a more heroic ending, but Tarkovsky refused. Against all odds, it premiered to critical acclaim, winning the Golden Lion at Venice and establishing him as one of cinema's great poets. Behind the camera, Tarkovsky's obsession with water reflections and childhood dreams became trademarks of his later masterpieces. Ivan's childhood was shot in swamps and forests near the Dnieper River under brutal conditions that mirrored its bleak beauty. Audiences across the USSR were stunned. This was not a patriotic film, but a requiem for an entire generation that lost its youth. Decades later, Ivan's childhood remains as devastating as ever. Its newly restored prints expose the textures of mudfire and memory in staggering detail. This was not propaganda. It was poetry written in smoke and silence. Tarkovsky did not show the glory of war. He showed the ghosts that never left. Number 6. The Dawns, Here Are Quiet, 1972. When The Dawns, Here Are Quiet was released, Soviet audiences were not prepared for its tenderness. Directed by Stanislav Rostotsky, this film told the story of 5 young female anti-aircraft soldiers and their commander defending a remote railway junction against invading German troops. It was a war film without generals, without large battles, and without glory, just quiet bravery and devastating loss. The film's emotional power came from its humanity. Each of the women had a story, a dream, a family, a memory of laughter before the world collapsed. Rostotsky, a war veteran himself, refused to glorify the violence he had witnessed. He insisted on filming in real forest locations, using the misty mornings of Karelia to mirror the fragility of life. During production, several actresses suffered exhaustion and frostbite, but they refused to quit. Their authenticity is what makes the film unforgettable. At first, Soviet officials questioned the idea of focusing on women instead of male heroes. They feared it would be seen as too sentimental, even weak. But audiences connected deeply to its emotional core. The film went on to win international acclaim and was nominated for an Academy Award for Best Foreign Language Film. For decades, it remained one of the most watched Soviet movies in history, replayed on television every Victory Day. Today, in its restored high-definition version, the colors of dawn glow again. The story of these 5 women stands as a reminder that heroism often hides in quiet places. There is no triumph in the final act. Only silence the sound of wind through birch trees and the unspoken grief of those left behind. It is a film that whispers, not shouts, about the cost of war. Number 5. Come and See the Dawn, 1978. Among Eastern Front war films, few are as mysterious as Come and See the Dawn, directed by Stanislav Govorukhin. Released quietly in the late 70s, it was overshadowed by bigger propaganda epics. Yet it dared to show something that others avoided: the emptiness that followed victory. The film followed a young Soviet officer returning home from the front only to find his village destroyed and his loved ones gone. His battle was no longer against the Germans, but against memory itself. Shot on location in Belarus, the production was plagued with difficulties. Equipment froze, reels of film were lost, and the director clashed with officials who accused him of undermining morale. They wanted a patriotic ending, but Govorukhin delivered despair and uncertainty. Several screenings were abruptly canceled, and the film was shelved for years. Only decades later did restorers unearth the original negatives, revealing its haunting cinematography. Long still takes and faces illuminated only by candlelight. When international critics finally saw it, they praised its restraint and honesty. It wasn't an epic of tanks and soldiers, it was a quiet dirge for the souls that war left behind. The title itself is symbolic. The dawn isn't a victory, but a reminder that even the sun must rise over ruins. The restored print, available today, has found a new generation of admirers online. Viewers describe it as meditative, sorrowful, and strangely healing. It asks a simple but devastating question: what does one do after surviving the apocalypse? For Govorukhin, the answer was to remember. Come and See the Dawn may never have achieved the fame of its contemporaries, but it has something rarer: truth. It lingers like smoke in the mind, a film not about fighting, but about what's left when the fight is over. Number 4. Trial on the Road, 1971. Few films in Soviet history faced as much censorship as Alexei German's Trial on the Road. Completed in 1971, it was immediately banned and would not be released publicly until the mid-80s. The reason was simple. It told the story of a Soviet soldier who defected to the Germans, then sought redemption by joining a partisan group. To the authorities, this moral ambiguity was intolerable. To German, it was the truth. The film's setting, a bleak, muddy landscape where loyalty is tested by starvation and fear, is far from the triumphant images of other war dramas. German shot in washed-out tones and natural light, creating a documentary realism that made the story feel disturbingly real. The lead actor, Vladimir Zemansky, delivered one of the most powerful performances in Soviet cinema. A man broken by guilt, neither hero nor villain, only human. Soviet censors declared it ideologically dangerous. They claimed it painted the Red Army in a bad light and portrayed collaborators too sympathetically. For more than a decade, it remained hidden in the archives, whispered about by filmmakers who admired its courage. When it finally premiered in 1986 during Glasnost, it was hailed as a revelation. Critics called it the film that dared to tell the truth. Behind the scenes, Alexei German paid dearly for his defiance. He was blacklisted for years and unable to direct again until the late 70s. Yet his work inspired a new generation of Russian filmmakers, from Andrei Konchalovsky to Alexei Balabanov, who learned that honesty could be more powerful than propaganda. Trial on the Road is now fully restored, its muddy battlefields rendered in crisp detail. It remains one of the bravest anti-war statements ever made, not about victory, but about conscience. Watching it today feels like uncovering a buried truth the state once tried to erase. Number 3. They Fought for Their Country, 1975. They Fought for Their Country was a film born from exhaustion and national trauma. Directed by Sergei Bondarchuk, it dared to show the Red Army not as flawless heroes, but as broken men holding the line while everything around them fell apart. Based on Mikhail Sholokov's novel, it follows a small Soviet platoon retreating from the German advance during the summer of 1942. There are no glorious charges, only mud hunger and fear. Bondarchuk, who had already achieved fame with War and Peace, wanted something raw and intimate. He stripped away grandeur and filmed long sequences of silence and fatigue. The cast included legendary actors like Vasily Shukshin and Vyacheslav Tikhonov, whose faces told stories beyond dialogue. The production was physically punishing, with soldiers collapsing under real heat and exhaustion. Every frame looked and felt like a memory scorched by war. When released, it divided audiences. Some praised its realism, others accused it of weakening Soviet morale. Officials hesitated to promote it, yet viewers found themselves unable to forget it. Unlike typical Soviet propaganda films, it carried no simple message, only sorrow and endurance. The camera lingered on trembling hands and faces smeared with dust, capturing the quiet dignity of survival. Decades later, it was rediscovered and lovingly restored. Its beauty lies in its stillness, in the way it captures how men laugh through despair and weep without shame. It is not a story about triumph, but about staying human when humanity itself is crumbling. They Fought for Their Country remains one of the most authentic depictions of the Eastern Front ever filmed, a reminder that even the strongest heroes are still human beings first. Number 2. The 41st, 1956. Before the Cranes Are Flying, there was The 41st, a film that dared to merge romance and war in a way Soviet cinema had never seen. Directed by Grigory Chukrai, it tells the story of a female sniper named Maryutka and the White Army officer she captures during the Civil War. As they drift together across the desert of Central Asia, they fall in love, but fate and ideology have other plans. The 41st was filmed with breathtaking visual poetry. The barren dunes became symbols of moral emptiness, and the horizon itself seemed endless and cruel. Soviet audiences were shocked by its emotional honesty. This was not a tale of triumph, but of tragic humanity. Maryutka's final act is one of the most haunting moments in Soviet film history, a moment that left viewers silent in theaters. Chukhrai faced enormous resistance from the censors. They accused him of glorifying the enemy and romanticizing betrayal. He argued that his film was about the absurdity of war, not its politics. Against all odds, it was released and went on to become an international success, earning awards at Cannes and cementing Chukhrai's reputation as a daring voice in Soviet cinema. The film's legacy endured despite decades of suppression and uneven distribution. When restoration experts revived it, they revealed the stunning visual depth once hidden under fading reels. Today, the 41st stands as a masterpiece of human emotion that transcends ideology. It shows that even amid chaos, people still dream love and mourn. It whispers that the enemy is sometimes just another soul lost in the same desert. Number 1. The Fate of a Man. Revisited, 1989, Restoration Cut. By the late 80s, the Soviet Union itself was collapsing, and filmmakers began returning to old truths long buried. Among them was Sergei Bondarchuk's masterpiece, The Fate of a Man, now re-released in its fully restored version, with footage that had been censored since the original premiere. The restoration became a symbolic act, a mirror held up to a dying empire, reflecting its pain through the eyes of one ordinary man. The new edition reintroduced several lost scenes that deepened the tragedy of the main character, Sokolov. His memories of captivity hunger and the loss of his son now felt eerily prophetic for a nation losing its own sense of direction. Critics across Europe hailed the restoration as one of the greatest rediscoveries of Soviet cinema, calling it a work of spiritual rebirth. Behind the restoration was a team of archivists who spent years piecing together decayed film stock hidden in storage. They discovered that the original reels had nearly been destroyed due to neglect and poor preservation. When the restored version finally premiered, it was met with tears, applause, and reverence. Watching it today feels like reading a letter from the past written in blood and dust. The Fate of a Man Revisited is not just a film, it is a monument to survival, both for its characters and for the nation that made it. It closes the circle of Eastern Front cinema, reminding us that even when history fades, the truth still finds a way to rise from the ashes. From Come and See's raw horror to the 41st's doomed tenderness, these restored Eastern Front epics remind us that war is never just about victory, but about the souls left behind. Which of these forgotten legends moved you most? Let me know in the comments below, and if you love rediscovered cinema, like, share, and subscribe for more hidden masterpieces of film history.